Every website on the internet uses HTML and CSS. Most also use JavaScript. In a website, HTML is the structure, CSS is the style, and JavaScript is the functionality. Here's a great interactive diagram from codeanalogies.com. You can see we have the page, the structure, styling, and functionality. And if we move this slider, so it's like the house. The page is like the house. So the structure, or the HTML, is like how many bedrooms there are or how many rooms. The CSS, the styling, is like the color of the brick here. And then the functionality, what you're doing, like eating, is the JavaScript. You can actually see the HTML that makes up any element on a web page by right-clicking an element and then going to Inspect. And all this right here is the HTML. The front end of a website is the part that users can see and interact with. It's the part that all happens on the user's computer or device. The back end is the part of the website that runs on the server and powers the front end. The back end includes the database, application logic, and API. Some static websites only need a front end. But if a website interacts with a database or involves a lot of dynamic content, then there needs to be a back-end server away from the user's device to do some processing before sending data back to the user. Full-stack development is just a combination of front-end and back-end development. By the end of this course, you'll have a better understanding of front-end and back-end development.
Welcome to this section of this course. In this section, I'm going to be teaching you everything you need to know to get started building your own web pages using HTML. I'm going to be showing you what HTML is, why we use HTML, and how you can build web pages using HTML. Now, in this course, we're going to be using Replit for our coding, and I'm going to show you how to set that up and how to do everything all from Replit. So the first thing we need to do is to go to replit.com. So once you go to replit.com, you're going to have to create an account and log in. So once you log into replit.com, it's going to bring you to this dashboard right here. But once you're in this dashboard, you're just going to come to this corner right here and click on this create button, or you can go to the top right corner and click on the new Replit button. So what I'm just going to do is to click on create, and it's going to ask you to choose the language you want to use. So for this section of this tutorial, we're going to be choosing this HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But you don't need to worry about CSS and JavaScript for now. We're just only going to be using the HTML part. So let's name this HTML. I'm going to create a new Replit. So that is going to take a few seconds to create all of that for us. And once that is created, I'm going to show you what this is. So as you can see, it's created this for us with like a boilerplate of code that automatically comes with this particular Replit that we created. So what I'm just going to do is to quickly show you around Replit what it does and how we're going to use this. So on this corner, you can see that it shows all the files that have been created. So because we chose HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, it created 3 files for us. One stands for HTML, one is for CSS, and one is for JavaScript. But as I said, for now, we're only going to be looking into the HTML part. So I'm going to close that tab just to make sure that we have enough screen. And in here, it shows the code base. So this is basically where we're going to be doing the main coding, like our code editor. And at this right side, it shows the output of whatever we are coding in here. So now that we have that out of the way, I want to quickly talk to you about HTML. So before we actually go into coding, I'm going to introduce you to what HTML is and why we even use it. So HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. So it's basically a standard markup language used for creating websites and web pages. So HTML describes how the structure of a website or a web page is going to look like. So any website you'll see on the web, any web page you see on the web, there is some HTML coding that has been done to build that. So HTML basically consists of different elements to make it what it is. So for example, if I come into this code, you can see that we have some hello world text being printed. And if you come into the code, you can see that hello world text is right here. So this hello world text is under this element name body. So don't worry about what all of this means for now. I'm going to go through all of that. But just know that HTML comprises of different elements. And now I'm going to talk to you about what all these elements are, the different type of elements that we have. So first of all, I'm going to remove some text because we're not going to talk about them for now. I'm going to remove all of this script because all of that are JavaScript and we don't need that for now. And I'm also going to remove this. So this is just a basic HTML code, right? So as I said, there are different elements. So for example, this doc type HTML is a declaration that defines this document is an HTML document. So this just tells us that whatever we're coding is an HTML document. And we have another element which is HTML, right? And it shows the root of the HTML page. So this means that anything that we are going to be coding in this HTML file is going to go into this HTML element. So we open it here and we close it here. I'm also going to talk about the structure of how we code an element using tags. So I'm going to talk about that in a bit. But for now, as you can see, we have this HTML that is the root of the whole project, right? And then we also have head that contains some information specifically about that HTML page. For example, under head, we have the title. Now this title is whatever you see on the browser. So on the browser right here where you see this index.html, that is the title of that page. So whatever we put here is what's going to be shown here. So as you can see, that basically is part of the structure of the whole web page. And then everything that is going to be in this section of the browser or of the web page goes into the body element. So that is what the body element is for. It's basically all the code that you're going to do is going to be done inside the body element. But let me tell you how we actually write this HTML element. So we write HTML elements by defining tags and the content and the ending tag. So let me tell you what I mean by this. Now I'm just going to close all of this real quick because we're going to have to start from scratch so you understand it. So for example, let's say we have an h1 tag. So this h1 is an element in HTML and is used to create like an heading text. For example, in here, if I put I welcome, and once I run that, you're going to see that it prints I welcome like an heading. So that is what this h1 element does. But how did we write this h1 element? First thing we do is to say we're going to open an h1 tag. So we're going to have two less than sign and greater than sign, and in there we're going to have the name of that particular tag. Then after that, we're going to have the content that is meant to be shown in that element. After that, we're going to close that tag. So this is how we close the tag. Now let me show you another tag. There is another tag that is used to define a new paragraph, and this tag is called p. So we have this sign, less than sign, we put p, we close that. Automatically Replit ends the tag for us, but I'm going to delete that and show you how to close it. So in here, we're just going to put something like this is a new paragraph, and then we're going to have to close it. We close it by using the less than sign, the slash sign, we put p and we close it back. So this is how to open a tag. So it's something like this. We're going to say tag. Once we close it, so this is basically the opening tag, and then in here the content, and then to close the tag is basically similar to this, but instead we have a slash. So what we can just do is to do less than sign slash Replit automatically close that for us. So that is basically how to create a tag and elements in HTML. Now we're going to be talking more about the basics of HTML. So basically the structure that you're meant to follow when you create a new HTML page. So I'm going to get rid of all of this, and let's start this from the beginning. So whenever you create a new HTML page, you must first define a doc type declaration. Now this shows the type of documents that this represents. So it allows the browser to know how to display the web page correctly. So to do this, we just need to use the less than sign because it is an element. So we do it the same way, and then we use this sign, and then we say doc type, and then we're going to specify the type of file that we're actually coding in, and this is HTML, and we're just going to close that. So this is the first thing you should do when you create a new HTML file, right? And then once you do this, the next thing that you want to be doing is to create the HTML tag. So this HTML tag, as I said a while ago, is the root of the whole HTML structure. So everything that we're going to be coding should be inside this HTML tag. We're going to write HTML, and automatically Replit closes that for us. Now inside this HTML, there is something else that we need to add, and this is the body. So the body basically takes any visible code or any visible thing that we want to show on our web page. Now for example, this I welcome should be under the body. For example, the code used to create, the HTML code used to create this Replit. Everything that we see right here should be stored under the body tag. So right here we should have the body, and as I said, Replit closes that for us automatically. So anything that we're going to code should go in the body right here. So now I'm going to talk more about different types of tags, what they are used for. So we have the heading tags, and they are mostly defined from their name to show headings. So we have them in a list from H1 to H6. So a while ago I showed you how to create this heading using the H1 tag, this heading that we see right here. So we do H1 and then we close it and say first heading. Now if we run that, you're going to see that it's just going to print or show out the first heading. As you can see, it shows first heading. Now if we use another tag named H2, this is also an heading tag, but it is smaller compared to H1. So if I say second heading and I run that, you're going to see that it's going to show second heading, but quite similar to this. And if I use another one, H3, I can say third heading. And once I run that, you're going to see that it's going to be smaller. So the size of the heading keeps descending, right, as the H1, H2. So as you ascend from H1, H2, H3 all the way to H6, the size keeps descending. So H1 is the biggest, so you can use this whenever you see fit in your code. Now the next one I want to talk to you about is the paragraph tags. I talked about this briefly a while ago, but let me talk more about this now. So it's a very basic and simple tag. What it just does is it creates a new paragraph. So for example, in your code, let's say you want there to be some spacing between different text, or you just want to show like a new paragraph structure, we use the p tag. So once again, we use the less than sign, put p, we use the greater than sign, and in between this opening and closing tags, we have the content of that paragraph. So we can say this is a test paragraph. So if I run this, we're going to see that first of all there's going to be spacing between it, and this is a normal text. It's not a heading, it's not bold like this H1 tags. So as you can see, it does say this is a test paragraph, right? Now the next one I want to talk to you about are HTML links. So for example, let's say on this page, if I click on invite and it takes me to another link or another page, there's basically an HTML link tag that allows me to do this. Now let me show you what I mean. So for example, let's say I want the user to say something like click this link, right? I want the user to click this link, I want to take the user to freecodecamp.com or I want to take the user to google.com. So what we can just do is to say, I'm going to remove this real quick. We open a new tag, but this time around we're using an A tag, right? And then I'm going to close it. So once I close it, I'm going to have the content in here, so I can say click this link, right? But now there's something different with this. This is when I'm introducing you to what we call HTML attributes. Now if you don't understand this now, you don't need to worry, because I'm going to have a whole section dedicated to talking about HTML attributes. So HTML attribute just shows me what parameters a tag needs to take. For example, this A tag is used for redirecting a user to another link or sending a user to another page, but it needs to know what page it wants to send the user to. So for example, once a user clicks on this click the link, we need to specify the link that we want to take the user to. So it needs to have an attribute, and the name of this attribute is HRE. And this is how we input attribute in HTML tags. In the opening tag, we leave a space and we type the name of the attribute and we say equals to, and we use this quote. Now in this quote, we specify the value of the attribute. So in this case, the value of this attribute is the link I want to take the user to, right? So let's say I say google.com. Now if I run this, we're gonna see that we have like a blue color with underline that is underlined. And if I drag this right here, so I'm just gonna go back to that, and let's say I drag this right here. Okay, so it gives us an error. It says repli.co/google.com. Now this is because I didn't define that it's an external link, so it's thinking that it's a link under this particular web page. So what you need to do is just to say HTTPS. So basically specify it as a new link on its own. So once I run that and it runs again, if I take this, if you look at the left bottom corner, you can see that it's showing me that I'm going to go to HTTPS google.com. So if I take this and paste this here, it opens google.com. So that is the basic way of creating a link, right? And don't worry about the attributes for now. I'm going to talk more about that soon. Now we are going to talk more about HTML attributes. So a while ago, I showed you how we used a simple HTML attribute to show the link that we want the user to go to once they click on this click the link button, or they click the link text. But now I want to talk more about what this attribute actually is, why we use it, how do we use it, and different tags where we can use this. So as I said a while ago, the attribute basically gives more information about the element or the tag. So for example, this A tag, it needed an information, and that information needed is the link we want to send the user to. So once the user clicks on click the link, we want to send the user to google.com. Now there are other tags that actually need us to, specify different things. That's when we use the HTML attributes. For example, we have the img, which is also known as the image tag, and this needs an HTML attribute that specifies where or the source of that image that we want to show. So before we go into that, let me quickly go through again how we specify, how we create HTML attributes. So as I said, in the opening tag, we write the name of the attribute and what the attribute contains. So basically like the value of the attribute, right? So for us to do this now, let's test it on another tag. So let me show you how we can display an image on your HTML page. So right here, we want to display a simple image. So what we can just do is to say img, right? And we're going to close this. So this image tag is a tag with an element that doesn't need to close it. So you know how we close the p tag by using this slash? We don't need to do that right here for img. And now the reason why is because the img tag or the image tag doesn't take a value, right? Now what I mean by this is like it doesn't showcase the value. The only thing it showcases is the image. So it just needs the source of that image. So we do all of this in here because we want that between those tags, we want to show this text, we want to show this text, we want to show this text, we want to show this text. But in an image tag, we don't want to show any text, we just want to show the image. So what we just need to specify is the source of that image. So we can do this similar to how we specified the link to this URL that we're redirecting. We're going to say src. So right now we want to specify the source or the link from where this image is coming from, right? So as I said, this is the name, and in here is going to be like the value of this source. So we can just take a random image. For example, we can take, let's see, we can take an image from this page. We can take an image, so we can just go on Google and search random image, and then in here we can take this dice image, and once we click on this dice image, we can say copy image address. So now that we have that image address, once we paste this in here, that is the source of where that image is coming from, right? If I run this, you're going to see now that it shows that image, right? Now obviously this is a tag used to show an image, and the reason why I said we don't close this tag is just because we don't need to write any text. That is why we don't have a closing tag and put a text within it. So that is how we basically do that. Very easy, very simple to do. Now we can an HTML tag can have more than one attribute, right? Now in here you can see that we have this src attribute, but what if we want to do more to this image? We need more attributes. Like what if we want to change the size or anything? So for example, we want to change the width of this image. I want to change the height of this image. So let's say we want to change the height of this image, right? And let's say we want to make it smaller or bigger. To do this, we're going to have to specify another image attribute, and this attribute is called height. So once again, we specify attributes by writing the name, we put the equals to sign, and in here we put the quotes. Now inside that quote is where we put the value of that particular attribute. So let's say we want to make this 200. If I run this, let's see what changes that makes to this particular image. You can see now that the image is shorter, and I can also do the same thing to the width. What if I want to reduce the width or increase the width? I'm just going to do width equals, then we put the column, the quotes, and then we also have the size. Let's say the size is also 200, and we run that. So once we run that, you can see that the width has also decreased. So this is basically how we can do this. So we can also have another attribute called alt. Now this alt attribute basically tells us, like, let's say more information about this image. So let's say we just want to say the image contains a dice, right? Say alt equals, put quotes, and we can say something like this image contains a dice. Now once we run this, we're going to see that this has a description of this image contains a dice. So we don't see this, right? But for example, if you go to the, let's say you get the source of this image or whatever, once it's coming with the description, it comes with this also description which says this image contains a dice. Now this is not what is shown to a user, right? But this is basically part of the attributes of this image. So there are also various attributes of different things we can use, right? And for example, right in here where we have this paragraph, so let me just get rid of this image, so you don't need it. So right here where we have this paragraph, let's say we want to show like, I don't know, maybe another information of this paragraph. So something like, once a user clicks on this, right, or once the user hovers over this, we want to show that this is a new paragraph or something like that. We use a title attribute. Now this is not really widely used, but just an example of what attributes are. Let me say I say title equals this, so and I'm just going to say test. Once I run this, I'm going to wait for that to show. So if I come to this paragraph right here, you can see that when I hover over this, you can see that there's a small button that comes up that says test. So that's just another useful attribute. Now, as I said, there are various attributes, and it's very easy to make mistake while defining attributes. So you must make sure, let me go through it again. You must make sure that you have the name of the attribute, you put the equal sign, you put the double quotes, and in there you put the value of that attribute. If you do that, you can't go wrong. Now let's talk more about HTML paragraphs. So in here, I briefly talked about what paragraphs are and how we can use them. So first of all, I'm going to get rid of this title attribute that I added to the paragraph. So as I said, we talked about this paragraph right here, but now I want to go deeper into what these are and how they actually show in your web page. Now, for example, let's say we have a paragraph right here, and we write this like this is a paragraph. And first of all, let me just have this like this and put this here. So just to make it a little bit more structured for me as the coder to see. So let's say this is a test paragraph, and I say something like this is a new line. Now you expect that it should print it, or it should show it here the way I typed it in here. But no, it's not going to do that. So if I'm going to run this now, and you're going to see that it just shows everything on the same line. But most of the time, or sometimes I might not want to do this. Now, even if let's say I put, let me see, let's run this. And then once we print it, you can see that all the spaces are lived in from A to new, it didn't show. So none of this shows, and there are different solutions to this, because most of the times we might want to create a new line, we might want to do various stuff. So first of all, let me show you the first solution that we can add to this. So let's say we want to have a break, right? So for example, in here we want a new line to be created. So we want this text to come to a new line. We can use another HTML element called break. So it's short form for BR, but it's called break. And what this means is just after that, wherever we put it, it's going to break to a new line. So this is another HTML element that doesn't require closing tag. And once again, this is because we are not showing any content for it. It's just there to perform its own function. So once we specify this BR like this, it's going to create a new line for us. So I don't even need to, make this in a new line. Once I just do break, wherever I put the break from, a new line is going to be created. So now once I run this, you're going to see that it says this is a test paragraph and a new line is being created there. Now that is one solution to the problem. But another solution, or the solution I go with when I have this particular problem, don't get me wrong, break is very useful, you're going to use it a lot when you're coding HTML. But for this type of problem, I use the PRE tag. So it's basically similar to the paragraph tag, but the difference is that the way we write our code, our text in here, is the way it's going to be shown on the web page. So for example, first of all, let me change this to PRE. I'm going to change this to PRE. So I call it the PRE tag, you can call it the pre tag, or whatever you want to call it. So let me just have this on a new line, and let me create a new line and say another line, yet another line, and another line. Once I run this, you're going to see that the way I wrote this here is how it shows here. You can see that even with the spaces that I put in here is what it's showing there. If I get rid of the spaces, we get rid of all the spaces real quick, you can see that the way we put it in there is how it's going to show for us. And that is the solution to that particular problem. Now let's see it. Run again. So I'm going to run this real quick. I'm going to wait for that to run. As you can see, everything has been fixed. So that is the way to solve that problem in a paragraph tag. Now let me show you some other elements that are going to be very useful when writing bare text like this. For example, let's say we want to have a line across this to, let's say, differentiate two different parts of a page. Just the way we add the BR tag, we're going to have a tag named HR. So this tag is an empty tag. Once I just do HR, right, it doesn't have a closing tag, it's just an opening tag. From wherever I did that HR, there's going to be a line, an horizontal line that is going to be ruled right here. And let's run that and let's see what that gives us. As you can see, we have a line, it leaves a space, it continues. I can have it everywhere and just say HR. I can do the same here and say HR, and I can do the same here and say HR. So once I run this, you're going to see that lines are going to be created everywhere, the exact same way we want it. You can see structured very well the way we want it. And that's how to use an HR tag in your HTML code or whenever you want to use it, let's say paragraph or another code. Now we're going to be talking about formatting text or formatting elements in HTML. So we might want to show different text in different ways. For example, we might want a text to be bold, we might want a text, to be superscripted or subscripted, or we might want a text to look like an italic text. So for all of these, we need to format them to look the way we want them to look. So to format it, we need to use HTML elements, right? So for example, let's say we have a simple text in here that says this is a text. So once we have a text that says this is a text right here, if I run this, now make sure that everything is under the body element as I said from the beginning. So it says this is a text. But what if I want this to be bold? Now for me to do this, I'm going to use an element named B, and that B stands for bold. So it basically makes whatever content is within it bold. So I'm going to cut this. I'm going to do B. I'm going to paste that in. So now once I run this, we're going to see that that text is bold. So this is how you make a text bold. You open the tag normally the way we do. You put B, you close that, put the text in there, and then you close the whole tag. So once you have that done and you run it, this should show this is a text. Now similarly, you can also use another tag named strong. So if I come here and I say strong, right, and I close it, and I say this is so strong, and once I run this, you're going to see that it looks exactly the same thing as this. There's another way for you to do that. So let's actually have a BR tag here, and we'll talk about what BR does. It breaks the line, just so we're going to have each step we're having on another line. So let me run that, and you're going to see that we have that on another line. So that is how you can, use the strong. But what if, let's say you want your text to show as an emphasized text? So for example, we're going to use a tag named EM. So let me say EM, and let me just say emphasize. Once I run this, right, you're going to see that that text looks emphasized. It looks different from the normal text. So this is kind of like an italic text. So if you want your text to look italic, you can use this emphasize, or you can use the I tag. And this I tag stands for italic. It makes that text italic. So once I say italic and I run this italic text, you're going to see that it looks italic, right? If you look closely, you can see the little difference between it, but they look very similar. So instead of us having, let's say, a break, a break element after every single text, what we can just do is to cut all of this, and then we can have a pre-tag. And this pre-tag, we can then paste all of that text in it. And then when we paste all of that text in it, the way we put it here is how it's going to be shown here. So once I run that, you can see it says this is this text and all of that. So it leaves the space for us. Let me remove this. And then in here, we do this just to make it look better. So once we run that, that should show the text how we want it, right? So once we've done with the italic, we can also mark the text. So let's say we want to do something like mark this. And then we want to have marked. Let's say marked. I'm going to show you what this does. So as you can see, it highlights that particular text for us, right? So it makes that text highlighted how we want it. So we can say, let's say we want to say this is an example, or this is important information, and then we just want to mark that important information. And important information. To run that, it's going to show us that important information highlighted. That is what the mark element does. Now let's say we want a text to be cancelled out. For example, where you see maybe on different web pages and you see something like this is something you shouldn't do, and then you see strike, like a line is striking through it. That is the delete element. So let me show you what I mean. So let's say we have a text that says don't do this, and we say delete, and in there we say do it, right? Now once I run this, you're going to see that do it has a strike through it. That is how that is done. If you see this anywhere on the web, it's done using, or you can do it using this delete element. Now we can also have an inserted text. So let me say ins, right? Let's say inserted. If I run this, you're going to see that it has this text like underlined, or basically highlighted, but not in this way, but it's underlined. Now let's say I want a text to be very small compared to what all of these are. So I can say small. I'm going to use a small element and say this is quite small. I run this, you're going to see that the size of this is smaller compared to all of these texts. Now, the last two ones I'm going to talk about are subscripted and superscripted. Now, in, let's say, chemical formulas where we have something like oxygen, which is like O2, and we want O to show right here, and then we want 2 to show, but we want it to show like on the bottom. Or let's say we have something like 7 raised to power 3, right? Instead of using this sign right here, we actually want it to show raised to power 3 on there. So it's very easy for us to do this. So for us to do the chemical formula type, we can say O, and then where we have this 2, we're going to say sub. So this subscripted means that it should be on the bottom. I'm going to show you what that is. O2. I'm going to run this real quick, and you can see that it shows 2 subscripted compared to O. Now let's say I want to have 7 raised to power 3. This time around, I won't use sub, I will use superscripted. I'm going to change B to P. And once I run this, you're going to see that it has 7 raised to the power of 3. We're going to quickly talk about colors in HTML. So I want to go more into like a little bit of styling of this text, or of a particular element. So for example, what I mean is, let's say I want this text to like have a background color, or I don't want this text to be black, I want it to be, let's say, white, or blue, or whatever. Now I can use the background color attribute. Now let me first show you what I'm going to do. So let's get rid of all of this under the body tag. And back in the body tag, what I'm going to do, let's say I just have a basic H1, right? And I say this is my heading. So if I run that, from now you should know that I'm just going to print a basic, this is my heading, right? So I'm going to have an attribute. So what an attribute is, it gives more information about that element. So we can have an attribute named style. Now this style attribute basically gives us a way of designing this particular, element. So let's say I want this particular element or this text to have a color of, let's say, red. So I'm going to say style equals to and double quotes, right? In there, I can have different things I want you to do. But we're not going to go in depth into that for now because that is more of like a CSS type of code, which you don't need to know for now. But what I'm going to show you is how we can, make it have a different color. So let's say I want the color, right, to be blue. This is how I do it. I just say color, column, blue. And once I run this, you're going to see that it changes that color to blue. Now this is the simple way of doing this. It's very easy, very simple. There are various different, like, I would call it like a styling command that we can give it. So this is a styling command in my words. So it's like by saying that the color of this particular text should be blue. Now let's say we want to have another style to it. Like, let's say we want it to have a different background color on its own. Now what we're going to do is to stop this, or no, we won't say stop this, we'll end this by putting semicolon. So this means that after this we can have another styling done in there. So what we want to do now is to just say background, and then we're going to do icon color, and now we can change the background color to whatever we want. Let's say I want the background color to be red, right? As you can see, we say background color, we use the colon, and then we use the value, right? So the value is red, and we put the semicolon to, so that is where it ends. Now once I run this, you're going to see that only that text has a background color of red. And that's the basic way of taking care of colors like that. And there are various stuffs where you can use like CSS code to style this. Like we can make this be in the middle, we can do more stuffs, but we're not going to talk about that for now. So this is just basically how you use colors in HTML. Now that we've talked about colors, the next thing I want to talk to you about is comments in HTML. Now this comment is not just only a concept in HTML alone, it's a concept used generally in programming. So what comments does is that it basically makes a particular block of code not display in, when your code is run or something. Now let me explain what I mean better. Now what I mean is, for example, let's say we have a text that is P, and we say a text. So we don't want this to show, because obviously when we run this is going to show in here, but we don't want this to show here, right? But we don't want to delete it also, we don't want to remove it from there. What you can do is to comment that block of code or that line of code. Now for you to comment, what you need to do is to use this particular syntax. Now just follow as I do. So what you're just going to do is to say less than, you're going to use the sign, and then 2 of this, and then after the code that you want to comment, you're going to close it by doing the same thing except with the exclamation marks. So as you can see, what that is, it's basically grays this part out. If I run this, you're going to see that that part doesn't show. Now this is a very good use of when we want to use comment, because we don't want this particular part of the code to be run when all our code is run, right? That is a very good use of comments. That is most of the time why I use comments. The other reason you might want to use comments is to actually drop a comment on the code that you are creating. For example, let's say we want to comment and say the code below displays heading that has a blue color, right? We don't just want to write that in and say the code below displays an heading, right? We don't just want to write that there, because if you write this there, it's obviously going to show right here in our code. So let's say we just want to put it in a comment so that whoever is reading our code, we understand what we are doing. So what we're going to do is to put this in a comment. Now, just the same way we did here, we're going to have the same syntax and close it. So now whoever is reading our code knows that this code here just displays an heading. If I run this, it's not going to show with it no more. That is because it's only in the source code, right? But it's not in the output. So it basically hides that content. Now you can use it, as I said, to hide a code or to stop a code from being executed when you run it, or you can use it to actually drop a comment on a code. Now we're going to look more into links in HTML. Now earlier in this course, we talked briefly about links, and now you can make a user click on a text or on a button and it takes the user to a specific link. But now I'm going to go deeper into what they actually do and more use cases of links. So I'm going to get rid of this real quick, remove that, and then we can remove that, and we're back to just the body. So now, obviously, I showed you how to create a link, and if you want to create a link, we say A, and in between that, we say, let's say, go to site. Let's say go to site, and then we have an attribute named ref, href, and let's say we want it to go to, https google.com. Now, once I run this, and if I just hover this on the bottom left corner, you can see that the link shows that it's redirecting us to google.com. So this is the basic way of just creating a link in HTML. So I'm going to talk more about like different things you can do with it. For example, if I click on this go to site, it's probably going to take me to the google.com, but then it's going to go away from this page and take me to that page. But what if I don't want to do this? So, for example, on different blogs or different websites where you click on a link and it automatically opens a new tab with that link, so it doesn't close the tab that you are currently on. You can do that using an attribute named target. So if I say target, right, and I make the value underscore blank, now this is going to create a new, tab for us. So let's say I run this and then I say go to site. You can see that it opens it on a new tab. It doesn't like go to that site from here. That is what that target blank does. This is very useful because sometimes you might, let's say you're building an application that you want a user to, let's say, view something, but you don't want them to go away from the site that they are in, from your site, because maybe there's some things that still need to be changed. This is a good use case of this target attribute. Now, there are two things called absolute URL and relative URL. Now, if you remember in the beginning, when I was trying to create a new link and I put google.com, right? When I ran it and I clicked on go to site, so let me just go to site, it's going to open a new tab. You can see what it's doing. It's saying replit.co/google.com. Now, this is because it sees this URL, this link, as a relative URL. Now, a relative URL means that we are trying to link to somewhere else within this particular web page. So it's basically saying something like, let's say I just say slash go. So it's basically going to go to replit.com/tomitoko/ all of this /go. That is a relative URL. It's just going to this particular URL, this link within the local, the local application or the local website. Well, let's say we want to go to an external website, like the way I went to google.com. Now that is an absolute URL. That is when we have to do the HTTPS, right? And then we have to specify the site that we are going to. So now that is an absolute URL. That is the difference between both of them. So we can also link to different things, like let's say we want to link to an email address. So let's say we want to say something like, let's have an A tag. I want to say, send me an email. And one that once the user clicks on this, is going to like open a new tab that is sending an email to a particular, a particular email address. First to do this, we're just going to say href equals. Now we are going to specify the link. What we need to specify is the mail to : and then we're going to put the address. So we can put sample@sample.com. So for example, if I run this, right? This is going to show me send me an email. And if I open it, it's going to, it says mail.google.com refuse to connect, but it basically open a Gmail and tries to, send an email. So this is just not showing because we're under like this replit. But let's say you have your own website and you use this, it's basically going to open a page where you can compose an email to that email site. Now we're going to talk about titles and favicons in HTML. So a title is very simple and very straightforward. So what it is, it's basically the text that is shown at the tab or at the top of the tab on the web page. For example, on this web page, you can see that what is shown is this index.html, HTML tutorial replit. That is the title of this page. So for you to specify the title of a page, right, you need to have an head element. So right after the HTML tag, we're going to have this head tag right here, and we're going to close it. Now this head tag basically contains different, information about the page. Some of it is information about the top corner, like the icon that shows here, which is the favicon, the title, and some other information. But in this part, we're going to be looking more into this title and this icon that shows here, which is also known as the favicon. So first, let's look at the title. So as I said, the title is the information that's been displayed in here. So for us to set the title of our web page, what we're going to do is to open a new tag and say title. And this title tag must be in the head element. So this is also another nested element, just like the way I talked about previously. So now this title element must be under this head element. So what I can just do is my page. So I can see my page is the title of this particular, web page. Now, if I run this, right, we're not actually going to see anything here because this is just like a, a demo of this. But let's say we have our website, we have our HTML file, and we run it on our browser here. You're going to see that the text here is going to be that. Now, I'm also going to show you how to, create your HTML files on your local computer and actually run it on the browser so you can see like this type of examples. But for now, know that this title is what is being shown here. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about, as I said, is the favicon. Now, this favicon is known as the logo or the image that is shown before the title on your page. So right here, you can see I have this tab and you can see this Google logo. That is the favicon. So to have the favicon, we're going to have the link tag, right? And then the way we close the link tag is just to do like that. We don't close it because it's similar to an image tag. We are not actually writing a text. So in here, I'm going to say rel, that is an attribute I'm going to give it. And I'm going to say it's an icon, right? And I'm just going to say href, which is the link of where I want to get that favicon from. I'm going to say equals this. Now let's actually get that link. Right here, I just search FreeCodeCamp favicon PNG. I got this, and I'm just going to copy the image address. I'm going to come in here and paste it. Now, if I run it, once again, this is not going to actually show here because this is a demo of this. But when I show you how to, run your HTML file on your browser, you're going to see all of these details. But that is how to use a favicon and the title in HTML. Now let's talk about tables in HTML. So a table where you can just basically represent data. I'm going to show you how to create that right now. So as you might have guessed, we're also going to use another element. And the element we're going to use this time around is going to be called table. So let me get rid of this right here. And I'm going to get rid of this link right here. So in the body, what I just want to do is to create a new table. So just a normal table, right? Just a normal table where we have the heading and then we have the data that this table contains. So for us to do this, we're going to say table. And then we're just going to close it just like that. And for us to now create like a new row in that table, we're going to use another tag named tr. So this stands for table row. So in this table row, I can say something like, let's say I want to have, let me visualize this. So let's say table data. So let's look for images. Let's make that table. Good. So now, for example, we have this, right? So this is going to be a row. So what we just created right here, this TR is a new row right here. Let's say I want to create another row to store all of this data. Under here, I'm going to create another TR, right? And I'm going to close that. So this means we have 2 rows now. So we can keep doing that for the amount of rows that we want. So what we can now do is that under the first row, we want to have the heading. So we want to say name, rank, gender, and here, all of this heading. So for us to do this, we're going to use the tag name th, which is also known as table heading. So that table heading, we're just going to do this real quick. So this th is going to be the heading. So let's say something like name. So this is going to stand for name. We might want to have another table heading named age. And then let's say we want to say something like class, right? And then if I run this, you're going to see what we have. So you see that we just have name, age, and class. And let's say under these, now I want to have a name like, let's say, Tommy, and I might put age, and I might put a class. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to create a new row. As you can see, I already did that here. But now, instead of doing th, what I'm going to do is td. So this means we're adding a table data, not a table heading, right? So you only use th when you have specified the head of that class, so of that table data. But for the values, we use td. So let's say something like Tommy, and for the age, use another td, and let's just say, I don't know, 18, 19. Let's just put a random age there, and another td. Get rid of that. Let's use small letters, and it says class, and we can say year. I don't know, year 20, 12, and then once we run that, you're going to see that we have this basic table that says name, Tommy, 19, year 12. Now we can keep adding more rows. What we just need to do is to do tr, and under tr I'm going to have td, and I can use another one and just say John. I'm going to have another td, and let's say the age is 30, and let's say is in year 15 or something like that. And once I run this, you're going to see that we basically have a simple table that shows that. So as you can see, it just shows the heading, it shows the data, which is Tommy 19, year 12, it shows John 30, and all of that. So that's basically what we need to build a table. Very simple and very easy. We make sure we have the table class, we make sure we have the tr, and then we make sure we have data in between. Now let's talk about lists in HTML. So let's say we want to have a simple list right here that just lists, let's say, a list of names, a list of years, or whatever. First of all, let's get rid of this table that we created. I'm not talking about that now. So what we're talking about is lists. So there are 2 types of lists. There are unordered lists and there are ordered lists. Now unordered lists are the ones that just have like a simple bullet point mark between them, before them. But an ordered list is listed from 1, 2, 3, 4, basically numerically. Now let me show you what I mean. Now for example, let's say we want to write an unordered list. We need to use a tag named ul. Once we use the ul tag, we need to open and close that tag. I'm going to press enter, and for us to now add list, this ul stands for unordered list. So for us to now add elements in this list, we're going to have to use the li, stands for list, and we're going to say something like name 1. And we can do the same thing to have a second name, li. We're going to say name 2. And let's have a third name. Say li. We're going to say name 3. So as you can see, we have 3 different names. If I run it, we're now going to see that we have name 1, name 2, name 3. Now this is shown listed, but it's not ordered. It doesn't have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. If we want it to be ordered, like to show in ascending order, then what we just need to do is to simply change this ul to ol. Now this ol means ordered list. So if I change that right here and I run this, we're now going to see that they have numbers before them. So if I keep adding, and let me say another list, and I say name 4, it's automatically going to add 4 as a number before that. Now there are also more to lists, like for example, we can show a description of this name. Now for us to do this, we need to change this ordered list to description list. So this description list basically allows us to show more description on each list if we want to. So what we're going to do now is we change that to description list. And let's say on the first list, we want this to be dt, not li. That's the difference. I'm going to remove all of this real quick. And under that, let's say we want to have a description of this name 1. We're going to use dd. So this just shows the description. And let's say something like, let's have like an asterisk and say this is the first name. Now once I run this, you're going to see what it shows us. So you see that it says name 1, and under here it leaves like a space and it says the description of that. We can add another one and just say dt and just say name 2. And now to show the description of this, we just say dd, and we can have the asterisk again and say this is the second name. Now if I run this, we're now going to see that we have name 1, we have the description, we have name 2, and we have the description. Now let's look into block element and inline element. So the difference between block and inline elements is basically this. So a block element always starts on a new line, and the browser automatically adds some space before and after the element. But for an inline element, the inline element doesn't start on a new line, and it just takes the space that it needs, so it doesn't have a space before it and after it. So there are examples of block elements, and the div is one good example of block element. Now let's quickly talk more about this div tag. So div tag is written like this, div, and it's closed. See, most of the time it's a wrapper or is a tag where all other HTML elements are contained with. So let's say we want to group our whole application or our whole web page into different sections. We can use a div tag to do that. So for example, we have this div tag, and I can just say something like h1 first div, and after this I can just say, I can just have a b tag in here. I can say this is bold, right? And I can then have another div tag just to separate that. Now it's just, this is wrapping all of these elements in it, and this one we can have an h2 and say another one, and for b we can say I. So if I run this, it's basically just a normal text that prints this, but it wraps it into these div tags. Now we can use different things to know these div tags. Like for example, I mean, to recognize the div tag, we can have an ID as an attribute that says that this old div tag has an ID of first div, or we can represent it using a a class. But we're not going to go into that for now. We can also do more things like in the beginning when we made the background color of this first div, of this h1, like red, we can do that to this div, and now everything inside the div tag will be affected once anything here is changed. Now let me tell you what I mean. So we're going to use a style attribute. We've talked about this before, and let's say we use color and say that we want the color to be green. Now once I run this, all the elements in here are going to have the green color, right? I can also change the background color. Let me say blue. Now once I run this, all the elements in here will have a background of blue and not the other one. You can see now that we're able to actually separate different sections of our code and give them different attributes. So I can do something similar here and say that style, and I want the color to be red, and I can say I want the background color, and I want this to be something like purple. Now let me run this and see what it gives me. You can see that these are two different sections. This has a different color and a different background color. This also has a color of red and a totally different background color. And that is what a div class is. And you can see that there's a space between and after that particular div class, space between and after that particular div tag. So now there is an example of an inline element. As I said, it doesn't take us as much space as a div tag, and it doesn't start on a new line. So an inline element, an example of that is something like an a tag, for example, or a b tag. This b tag now is an inline element. This means that I can basically, let's say, just have a normal p, right? And say this is the text. And in there, I can just have a b tag and say bold one. So it can stay within a text. It can stay wherever you put it. It doesn't really need to be separated on its own compared to a div tag. So that's the difference between a block element and an inline element. So there are various examples of block elements, like a few that I can see on top of my head are like, HR, like div, as I said, like PRE, UL, section, and there are other elements like that. And for inline elements, we have the a tag, which we used earlier. We have the bold tag, we have image tag, and various more. So this is basically the difference between those two. Now let's look into iframe in HTML. So an iframe is used to show a web page inside a web page. So what I mean by this is, using an iframe, we can have like a box that shows another web page in our own web page. So let me show you how to do this. It's very easy and very simple. All we just need to do is to use the syntax. So we're just going to come here. We're going to get rid of all this div. I just want to say iframe. We're going to close it. Now it's going to take some attributes. The first attribute it's going to take is the source. So once it takes the source attribute, this source attribute is the link that we want to show in here. So let's say I want to show google.com. So this is going to show google.com in here for me. So that is that easy to do. And once I run this, you're going to see what it shows. You can see that it creates a box. It says refuse to connect. That is probably because of this replay page. But normally, once you use this iframe, as you can see, it's trying to connect to google.com. So there are more you can do to this iframe, more things, like you can, specify the height, the width of how big you want this to be. So I'm going to give you more attributes and say height. And let's say 100. If I run that, you're going to see that it goes smaller. And let's say I also give it a width of 100. And if I run that, you're going to see that the width also goes smaller. So I can increase it however I like. I can say this is 500 and I can say this is 500. So if I run that, you're now going to see that we have a big iframe right here. So that's how to create a very basic iframe for us. Now you can also remove the border, this line where you see, we can do that. So to do that, we are going to use the style attribute. We've talked about this style attribute before. We use it to, add some styling to that particular element. So now what we're just going to do here is to say border. Now this border is basically the line that we see right here. I'm going to say border equals none. If I run this, you're now going to see that there is no lines there. The lines that were shown before are gone. Now let me just make this quite smaller so you can see that very well. Now if I run this, you're going to see that it's just a square. There's no lines on that. So that's a very basic way of how to create iframes in HTML. Now let's look into symbols in HTML. So let's say we want to display different symbols, like let's say the pound sign or the euro sign, or we want to display more symbols like the copyright sign, card sign. I'm going to explain what I mean in a bit. So if you want to display all this stuff, there is a particular, syntax that you have to follow in HTML. So for example, let's say in this body, I have a p tag. I'm just going to say this is euro sign. So I now want to display the sign of the euro's currency. For me to do this, I'm going to say and. So I'm going to use this and right here on my keyboard, and I'm going to say euro. Now, if I run this, you're going to see that it displays the euro sign for me. That didn't display the euro sign, and that's because we didn't have the semicolon. So we must make sure we have a semicolon. Now you're going to see that it displays the euro sign. Now there's more and more that we can do, and I'm going to go through most of them. So for example, let's say we want to have, something like the copyright sign. So the copyright sign, what we need to do is to do and we're going to do hashtag, and we're going to do 169. So note that you must end with this semicolon, if not, it's not going to work. So once I run this, you're going to see that we have the copyright sign. Now there's a lot, like we can have the registered sign. It's similar to this, but it is 174. And once I run this, you're going to see that we have this R sign. So we can also have like the, the signs on the card, like the spade, the R to the diamond, and all of that. So for us to do this, right here, let's say I want to have the spade sign. I'm just going to have 9824. And this is going to show the spade sign on a card, as you can see. And if I want to have the clubs, I'm going to do 9827. Right? That's going to show the clubs. And let's say I want to have the art, I'm going to do 9829. That's going to show the art. And if I want to have the diamond, I'm going to do 9830. So once I run that, you're going to see that that shows that for us. Now there is a lot, like let's do one more, for example, like a trademark. We're going to just change this to 8482. So once you change this, you're going to see that we have the trademark sign, TM. So this is just a basic way, basic syntax of, showing symbols in HTML. Now there's a lot of, all of this, and you don't have to know this off by heart. You can just search on Google HTML symbol for displaying the, the pound sterling sign, for displaying the pi sign. Anything you want to do, you can just search on Google. I don't advise actually knowing all of this off by heart. So that is how to, create symbols or show symbols in HTML. Now let's talk about forms in HTML. So a forms is a way you can collect input from a user. So when you collect input from a user, these forms are mostly sent to like a server for, processing or whatever the data is needed for. For example, let's say you go to a website and you want to log into that website. You're going to see that there is a simple form where you fill in your username and your password. Then you click on submit, and that data is being sent to a server that checks whether your username and password are actually in the database of users. So the basic reason why we have form in HTML is to collect data from user. So let me show you how we can implement a form in HTML. So the first thing you need to know is the form tag. So I'm going to remove this, and I'm actually going to just start by saying form. And when I close it, it's going to close by itself. So now this form tag is HTML now knows that we're trying to create a new form. So it's going to have like an input bar where a user can input, something. But now there are more to just this form than only just the element. So we need to have the input element also. So the input element is used to display what type of form or what type of data we want to collect. So for example, let's say I have input. This is how we type input, and then we close it like this, right? And what we can just do is going to collect various attributes, but the most important one is the type. So as I said, it shows or it specifies what type of data we are trying to collect. So let's say I just want to collect a text. I'm going to input text in here, and I can run that. So once I run this, you're going to see that we just have this simple bar right here where I can input a text, right? I can also have an input that just collects numbers. So let's say input type, and we can say number. And if I close that and I saved it, I run this, you can see now that we have these two buttons here which can help us increment and decrement the number. So this only collects numbers. So this basically tells us like what we actually want to input, what type of data we want to input in here. So let's first of all look into this text field very well before we go into the other fields. This text type. So for example, whenever we have an input, right, we must always have a label beside it. So right here where we have this bar, if we don't have something saying input your name or username, the user is not going to know what to input. That's where the label comes in. So we have a label, and we close that label, and here we can just say name. So here where we have name, we can now say input type text. So I can run this, and you see it just says name and it has the bar beside it. So let's say I want to leave a space and I want this to be on the bottom. I can just add a BR tag, and I can run this. So you're going to see that it's now on the bottom. But now the input needs more stuff than just the type. Like we need to know the ID and the name of that particular input. So whenever a data is being sent from this HTML or from this HTML form, right, it's being sent using the name of that particular input. If there's no name, there is no way a data can actually be collected by the server. So we need to specify the name, right, of this input, and we can just say the name of this input is username, right? And we also need to specify like an ID. Now we use this ID just to be able to recognize or to be able to refer to this particular input within our HTML page. So I can also say the ID is something like an username. I can give it the same name. Now for this label, I want this label to actually be linked to this particular input, because for all I know right now, they are just two different elements. But what I want to do is that I want HTML, this our code, to know that this label is for this particular user input. So for me to do that, it's fairly easy. I'm just gonna need to have an attribute here that says for, and we're gonna say for username. See, we set that by using the attribute that we already defined here. So if we run this, that's not going to make much of a difference, but now we know that this label is for this input. Now let's do the same thing for, let's have another form. We just have a BR, and let me have a label. I'm going to close that label, and let me say, page, and let me just say school. Right. And I'm going to have a for, but for now, I'm just going to leave it blank. So let's quickly create an input for that. So let's say input, and then we're going to have a type, and the type of that input is also going to be text, and let's give it a name of school, and also an ID of school. Now I'm going to say this is for school. Now once I run this, I'm going to see that I have another particular field right there. So that is the basic way of doing that. Now let's look into another type of input. Like we've talked about text, but what if we want to talk about like another type, like let's say checkboxes, right? So let me come in here, and I'm just going to remove this particular input. So this input where it says type text, I'm going to change that text to checkbox, and I'm going to give it an ID of username, same username, and let me just say the value is something like let's just say Tommy. So I want the user to check if this is its value, and I can just give it another one and say right here I can just remove all of this, right, and I can just have this and copy it. So it's basically the same thing but with a different type. So now I'm going to say name, this is another username. I can say username 2, and let's say Tim. Right, now if I run this, you're going to see what it gives us. So you can see that it gives us name, and it also gives us name. So what I want to do actually is right here, I want to have Tommy, and I want to have Tim. So once I run this, I want the user to click which one is your username. Is your username Tommy? Then tick it. Is it Tim? Or is it both of it? Then tick any of it. Right? So that is fixed right there. And what you just need to know is that whenever the value is being sent, for example, if a user ticks Tommy or he ticks both of it, the value that is being sent is not this value that shows here. It's actually the value that is specified as an attribute in here. Right? So whenever a user clicks on submit, we're also going to talk about the submit button soon. When a user clicks on submit, that all the data is going to be taken from here and sent to whatever server we want it to be sent to. But the value that's actually going to be sent is this value that we specified here. Now we can do exactly the same thing for like radio buttons. So very similar to what we just did, but what we're just going to do is instead of checkbox, we're going to say radio. Instead of checkbox, we say radio. If I run this, now you're going to see that it prints Tommy, but this time around it uses like a radio button. So that is fairly easy to understand, right? So the next thing I want to talk about is actually submitting this data. So let me remove this right here, and let me remove this BR. Let's just make it look good, so it doesn't look confusing. Now once we run this, should just have it beside it, so we can pick with the one we want. Now that we have that, I want that whenever a user now clicks on submit, we actually want to submit a button. This is the easiest. What we just need to do, let's first have our BR tag right here so it doesn't collide. We're just going to have another input, but this time around, what we just need to do is to say type submit. Once we say type submit, HTML knows that we want to have the submit button. That means the button that whenever a user clicks on this is sending all those data or those inputs somewhere. But now we also need to have a value. Let me run this first and see what it shows. You can see that it automatically writes submit there. But what if I don't want this to be submit? Let's say I want it to be, send. Then I can do value, and I can say send. If I run this, you can now see that that submit button has been changed to send. Now that is how easy it is for you to do that. But now where is this data actually being sent to? Like when we use send, remember I said for this radio and checkbox, it's not actually this Tommy that is being sent, it's the value that we specified here that is being sent. But when we click on send, where is it being sent to? Now this is when we need to add an attribute to the initial form. Now this attribute is called action. This action will tell us where the data is meant to be sent to. So what we're going to do is say action equals. Now let's say we want to send this data to another page. Imagine we had another page, like let's say something like form.html, right? We can create that, and we want this to be sent to that form.html. Once we hit send, that is going to be sent to form.html, basically. So you can also like send it anywhere you want to send it to. Let's say you have a web application you're building, and we can say we want to send it to like /receive. You can do anything you want to. But this action basically specifies the place or the URL or whichever link is getting that particular form, or where you want to send that particular form to. So that is fairly easy, and that's how to easily do that. The first thing we need to know, let's go through what we just did. So the first thing that we did was to create our form element, and then we created different labels and inputs. I showed you the types, and I showed you how to use the submit button. And once you have the submit button, I also showed you how to add the action so that you actually know where it's going to. But now that we know where it's going to, right, where we put in this action, let's say form.html, We also want to know what method is being used to send this data. Now, you don't need to know the details of what I'm about to say, but there are basically two methods that we can use to submit a data, and it's called get and post. So when submitting the data, you can choose to either submit it using get and post. You can learn more about that, on YouTube anyway if you want to know. But for example, we can just specify method equals post. So let me just show you the quick difference between get and post. When you are sending a data using a get method, all the details of the data that you are sending is going to be shown in the URL bar. For example, if I search something on Google and I hit enter, everything I searched, the keyword I searched is going to be shown in the URL bar, right? That's when you use a get method. But if you use a post method, it's not going to be shown. There are also just a lot of differences between the two, but that's just one difference that I can use to easily explain it. So you're going to pick whatever method you want to use to send this data. You can use post or you can use get. If you don't use any method, imagine you don't specify any attributes right here. As default, HTML is going to use a get method to submit that data. But for us, let's just specify it as we can say get. So it's that easy. You just need to, you need to specify the method, the action, so that everything works perfectly. So I hope you understand everything we did about this HTML fonts. It's fairly easy, and I hope you were able to follow along. So earlier in this tutorial, I said that I was going to show you how to actually create an HTML file and run it in your browser. So I'm going to show you how to do it locally on your computer. So what you need to do is to open a code editor. Right here I am in Visual Studio Code, but you can use any one you want. You can use Sublime Text, you can even use a notepad. Anything that can make you write code and you are comfortable with, you can use it. So once you have your code editor opened, I'm just going to create a new file right here. And let me name this file index.html. Now whenever you're creating an HTML file, it must have this .html extension at the end. You can name this whatever you want to name it. Let's say test, let's say website.html. You can name it whatever you want, but it must have this .html at the end. I'm going to create that file, and I'm just going to create it in this particular folder. Now that I have this file created in here, I can now put anything I want to code. So let's say I'm just going to come here and copy all of this code that we did here. I'm going to paste it, right? So once I have this code in here, I've put all my HTML, everything I want to do. Now what I can do is to now run this on my browser. For me to do this, I'm going to come into the folder where I created that, and I'm just going to open index.html. So automatically when you open that index.html file, it's going to open it on your browser and show you the result of what you are coding. So earlier I talked about the title. So we tried to create a title here, but it wasn't showing just because we are using like this browser right here and not an an actual page. But now that we have the page, you can see that this my page title is showing. Now if I go back to this code, and let's say I change this to test title, and whatever I change in here, once I refresh, you can see that title is now test title. So that is an easy way of actually coding HTML files or doing it locally, then showing the result on your browser. In this section of this course, we're going to be looking into CSS. So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Now what it does is that it allows you to add styling to your HTML page. Now I'm going to take you from a beginner's level to a level where you can confidently use CSS to style your HTML code. Now without wasting any time, let's actually get straight into this section. So now we know that CSS is what we use to basically style everything we do in our HTML. So, but how do we actually even, create a CSS file? How do we let that CSS file be linked to this particular HTML file? I'm going to show you how to do that. So first of all, to create a CSS file, you need to create a file named style.css. First of all, right, we're using Replit. So Replit automatically created this file, these three files for us. But right now we're going to be looking more into this style.css. So I'm just going to drag it over here. So style.css is basically a CSS file that we're going to be using on this HTML file right here. So you can name it whatever you want. You can name it, main.css. But whenever you're creating a CSS file, it must have this .css extension to it. So now that we know that we have that, how do we actually connect this CSS file to this particular HTML file right here? Now this is very easy. We're going to use a HTML element called link. So right here we need to say link, and we're going to close it like this. That is how we close this side. And it's going to take two different attributes. The first one is going to be rel, and that is going to say that this is a style sheet that we're linking to. We're going to say style sheet. And we're also going to have to say the name of that style sheet or the link to that style sheet. So right now we're just going to use the name of that particular CSS file, because on this Replit, right, all of these are under the same folder, so we can just simply say the name of the file instead of saying folder / whatever, because we have it in the current folder. So I'm just going to say style.css. Now once I say this, any CSS I code in here or anything I try to do in here is automatically going to be added to this particular page. It's going to be effective. Now that you know how to do that, I'm going to start straight into the main CSS. So I'm going to talk about CSS syntax. Like how does it even work? How do we even start coding CSS? So to write code in CSS, we need to know two things, and they are called the selector and the declaration. So as you can see right here, automatically Replit has this basic CSS code. And what this does, right? So this HTML right here, as you can see, it is the selector. So first of all, let me just remove this HTML and just have body. Don't need to worry about that comma for now. So we have this body right here, and that is the selector. And then all of this, we're saying the height of body should be 100%, the width of body should be 100%. Don't worry about the details of what this does for now, but let me just introduce you to how we write code in CSS. So this is the selector, right? And this is the declaration. Now this means that this body, we want whatever we are doing inside here to be affected on this body element. So what this is going to do now is going to go into whatever HTML is linked to it, and it's going to look for a body element. So it's going to come here and it's going to look for this body element, right? Once it sees this body element, is going to say whatever we do inside these brackets, we want to have it being effected on this body element. Without wasting any time, let me show you how to do, our first change. So let me just get rid of this and let's actually do something. So I'm going to use the body again. Let me say body. This is how we write a CSS code. So we say the element, right, that we want to change. And then we use these curly braces and you press enter. Now anything you do in here is going to be affected with the HTML or whatever file is being linked to it. So now we're saying body. Now there are different declarations. The declaration can be, we want the color to be, red. We want the whatever font size in there to be, 15. We can do a lot of things. I'm going to go through all of that in this section of this course. So first of all, let me just show you how you can change the background color of the body to be, let's say, blue or red. So first of all, you know that this body is where all the code goes into. That means everything we're going to be coding in our HTML is going to be under this body, the visible part of the web page. So now we want the visible part of the web page to have a background color of, let's say, green. Let's make it green. So what we're going to do now, we're going to say body. Now whatever we do in here, which you should know now, is the declaration. We're going to say background. This is how you change the background color. Background hyphen color. And we want that to be green. And then you must add this semicolon. Now the reason why we must add this semicolon is so that we can have another declaration right here. Let's say I want to change the font size, I can write something else. If you don't add that semicolon, it's going to think that whatever you add here is still part of this first declaration. So you must add the semicolon to end that declaration. So this is how you do it. Background color, which is what we want to change, you put a colon and then you put a value. So think of this as a key and this is a value.